Today's lesson is interpreting rate of change and initial value. I hope that as we move through this lesson, you see how similar it is to many of the things that we discussed in chapter 4 earlier when we talked about slope and y-intercept and those things. Okay, so in example 1, we've got rate of change and initial value. The equation of a line can be interpreted as defining a linear function. The graphs and the equations of lines are important in understanding the relationship between two types of quantities, represented in the following examples by X and Y. So an example, an MP3 download site that offers downloads of individual songs with the following price structure: a $3 fixed fee for monthly subscription plus a fee of 25 cents per song. The linear function that models the relationship between the number of songs downloaded and the total monthly cost of downloading songs can be written as y equals 0.25x plus 3, where x is the number of songs downloaded and y represents the total monthly cost in dollars for MP3 downloads. So let's break down, which this should be familiar to you, what all the pieces are and what they mean. Okay. So first it says, in your own words, explain the meaning of 0.25 within the context of the problem. Okay, so the 0.25 is in the slope position. So slope is another word for rate of change. So that means that's giving you the rate in which the cost is changing. So 0.25 means in context of our problem, because that's important. I'm not just going to say it's the slope. In our problem, it's representing or meaning, so means that there is a cost. Now we want to think back to Ski Bird and talk about whether it's increase or decrease. So since it's a positive 0.25, it's an increase. So it's in cost increase of, this is representing 25 cents for every one song downloaded. So I'm not just going to say 0.25 is the slope. I want to know what that slope means in context of the problem. So again, 0.25 means that there's a constant increase, a cost increase, sorry, of 0.25 or 25 cents for every one song we download. Now, in your own words, explain the meaning of 3 within the context of the problem. 3 is in the y-intercept or initial value position. But I'm not going to just do that. I'm going to do it in context of the problem. So the 3 means there is an initial cost of $3 for 0 songs. So that means, so there is a fixed cost, or some might say fee, to subscribe to the site. The values represented in the function can be interpreted in the following way. So remember, this right here is your rate of change, which we also know as slope. And then this one is your initial value, which you also know is referred to as y-intercept. Okay, so underneath it breaks it down for you. The coefficient of x is referred to as the rate of change, so we've labeled that. It can be interpreted as the change in the values of y for every 1 unit increase in the values of x, remember? So this is the same thing as slope. Think about your slope formula. It's the change in y's, y2 minus y1, over the change in x's, x2 minus x1. When the rate of change is positive, like we had, 0.25, we want to make sure we say that the function is increasing. If that rate of change ends up being negative, make sure you include decreasing in your description. You want to be very specific. The constant value at the end is referred to as the initial value or the y-intercept. Okay, so there it is. And it can be interpreted as the value of y when x is 0. So again, this should be reiteration of things that we've learned previously. So now, that was the first site. We now have another site that offers MP3 downloads with a different price structure. A $2 fixed fee for a monthly subscription plus a fee of 40 cents per song. So first, they want us to write a linear function to model the relationship. Remember, just means write the equation for the number of songs downloaded and the total monthly cost. Just like before, X is the number of songs and Y is the total monthly cost in dollars. So we're going to have Y equals, this time our rate of change or slope is 40 cents. So that gets multiplied by X, and our fee is $2. So plus 2. So it says determine the cost of downloading 0 songs and 10 songs. So songs, if we go back, is represented by X. So they want us to find out what happens when X is 0 and when X is 10. So I'm going to use my equation, but I'm going to replace the X with the number. So Y equals 0.40 times 0 plus 2. So Y is equal to, this is 0, so 2. Here we've got Y is equal to 0.40 times 10 plus 2. So this would be 4 plus 2, which is Y equals 6. So what you've just gotten is 2 points. This coordinate is 0, 2. This coordinate is 10, 6. So it's essentially making 2 lines of a table. You picked a value for X, they gave it to us, we plugged it in and found the Y, we did it with another value. And really 2 is all we need to create the next part. So the graph below already is showing the linear model for the first subscription site, company 1 that we talked about on the front with the Y equals 0.25X plus 3. Now we're going to graph the equation for the second subscription site on here by marking the 2 points that we just got and connecting them. So we've got 0, 2, and then we've got 10, 6. And we're going to take those 2 with the ruler and connect them. Make sure you're careful and as accurate as possible. Okay, so we connect those. And I'm actually going to put a little dots of hash marks kind of over it so you can see the difference between the 2 in case you're having trouble seeing on the picture. If you feel like you can tell the difference, okay, then don't worry about it. I'm just trying to make it a little dotted looking. And technically, these should both be extended like that. So remember, company 1 was already here. This is now company 2. Okay, so we've graphed it. And now 4 says, which line has a steeper slope? So looking at that, which one is steeper? That's going to be company 2. Which company's model has the more expensive cost per song? Well, if you go back and look at the first company, it was 25 cents. Our new company is 40 cents. So company 2 does. Company 2 has a larger or more expensive, so we'll say a more expensive cost per song, which means it has a greater slope. That's why it's steeper. Okay, which function has the greater initial value? So the one on the front had a 3, that was our fee. This one has a 2. So which one actually has a greater initial value? That would be company 1. Okay, and we're in is greater, and that's because we're doing $3 versus $2. Okay, so it has the greater initial value. So then it says, which subscription site would you choose if you only wanted to download 5 songs per month? So if we do 5, we're going to go look at the graph because we already have the information. Here's 5. We're going to follow it up. I run into the dotted line or company 2 first. It looks like it's charging 4. And company 1 is charging more than that. It's above it. So if I was going to pick only to download 5 songs, I would pick company 2. Okay. And why is because the Y value when X is 5 is smaller, which you can just tell by looking at the graph. Okay, now if you didn't have a graph, let's say you just had the two equations, you would just use the equation. So you would plug in 5 for X, but you would do it in the original one you had. So you'd put a 5 there, and then that was, remember, plus 3. And then you would compare that to using the new equation with 5 in X's spot. And you would just see which one is lower, okay? But since we have the graph, we can go ahead and use it. So then it says, which company would you choose 10 songs? And it says explain, so that's why I'm explaining as we go. So 10 songs, I'm going to come up here and look at 10. I actually run into company 1 before I run into company 2, which means this one's lower. So this time I would want to pick company 1. And that's because we have a smaller Y value at X equals 10. Okay. So now you are going to complete some practice questions. I want you to pause the video and complete question number 1. Then you can resume the video to watch the answer to that. So pause now, resume when ready. Okay, number 1 says, when someone purchases a new car and begins to drive it, the mileage, meaning the number of miles the car has traveled, immediately increases. Let X represent the number of years since the car was purchased, and Y represent the total miles traveled. The linear function that models the relationship between the number of years since purchase and the total miles traveled is given by Y equals 15,000X. So, first part, A, identify and interpret the rate of change. That's 2 things. Identify is name it. So that's 15,000, because rate of change is the same thing as slope. Now, interpret it means, what does it mean in our problem? So this is the mileage. And since it's positive, remember, we need to put those words in. If it's positive, it's increasing. If it's negative, it's decreasing. So the mileage is increasing. So increases, oh, that's a C. 15,000 miles per, what did it say? This is per year. Okay, it says identify and interpret the initial value. So identify, I'm just going to name it. I don't see anything here, so that means it's really plus 0. So I have 0. And what does that mean? Initial value is what's happening when X is 0. So this means there are no miles on the car. When it was purchased. So in other words, at a time of 0 years means you just bought it. So it should have 0 miles on it. And then C is the mileage increasing or decreasing each year according to the model. So since we have a positive 15,000, we know the mileage is increasing. Explain your reasoning. The slope, okay, or rate of change, is positive. So that's telling me it's an increase. So at this time, pause the video and try number 2 and resume the video when you're ready to go over the answers. Okay, number 2, when someone purchases a new car and begins to drive it, generally speaking, the resale value of the car in dollars goes down each year. Let X represent the number of years since purchase and Y represent the resale value of the car in dollars. The linear function that models the resale value based on the number of years since purchase is given by Y equals 20,000 minus 1,200X. So A, identify and interpret the rate of change. So this time the rate of change is negative 1,200 or negative 1,200. And that means that the resale value decreases $1,200 per year since purchase. B, identify and interpret the initial value. So they did a little something weird to you. Instead of doing y equals mx plus b, they did y equals b plus mx, which we've seen. So just make sure you pay attention to that. The slope was here. So this is your y-intercept or initial value. So it should be 20,000. Okay, and then this is the car's value at purchase. It starts to depreciate or go down once you buy it and leave the place. So if you show up at 0 and you buy it, it's still worth, or you go to look at it a lot, it's worth what its price is. So it's the car's value at purchase. And then last, is the resale value increasing or decreasing? So since it was a negative 1,200, it's decreasing. Okay, and how do I know that? Well, the slope or rate of change is negative this time. Okay, now what I'd like you to do is try the most challenging one, which you could do. I want you to try it and then resume the video to watch your answer. Okay, so the challenge is, suppose you are given the linear function y equals 2.5x plus 10. Okay, so here's an example, because these are a little open-ended. So A says, write a story that can be modeled by the given linear function. So when you do something like this, you want to pay attention to the slope and make sure you describe that in a way that makes sense. And then you want to look at the y-intercept. So what I wrote is, I am ordering cupcakes for a birthday party. The bakery charges, now this is where I want to talk about my slope. So I'm going to say $2.50, because 2.5 would be $2.50 per cupcake, because that's a rate. So per cupcake. And then the 10 would be some kind of fee. So a fee that you might pay for cupcakes would be maybe the decorating. So I'm going to say, and a $10, I should say plus, that would be a better description, not and, plus a $10 decorating fee. So in my story, what is the rate of change? Well, all of us should have 2.5 no matter what, because that's the rate of change that was given to us. But in my story, it is the cost increase, because it's positive, be specific, of $2.50 for every cupcake ordered. And then C, what is the initial value? That's the same for everybody, should be 10. But for me, what does it mean in my story? It means there is a flat fee. Okay, it means I got to pay it no matter what, of $10 to decorate the cupcakes. So there are definitely other scenarios that would fit. If you had trouble figuring one out, there's one that would work for you, and hopefully that helps make a little more sense to you. Okay, so that is the end of our lesson on interpreting rate of change and initial value.